Jennifer and James Crumbley, the parents of convicted murderer and minor Ethan Crumbley, are each facing 4 counts of involuntary manslaughter for their alleged roles in the mass casualty event at Oxford High School on November the 30th, 2021. This last Thursday, January 25th, Jennifer Crumbley's trial officially began in Oakland County, Michigan. In her opening statements, Jennifer's attorney, Shannon Smith, quoted a Taylor Swift song, Bad Blood. The defense attorney said that on her way to trial, she blasted Taylor Swift in her car to calm her nerves, and she heard a line that she says resonated with the trial. She accused the prosecutors of applying a Band-Aid to a much larger problem. Now, this is an unprecedented case in U.S. history. So let's take a look at how we got here and what the legal implications might be moving forward. I'm Collier Landry. Let's get into it.
Testimony continued today in the most notorious criminal trial in...
When I was 12 years old, my testimony sent my father to prison for murdering my mother. I decided at an early age that our trauma should not be what defines us. It's what we choose to do with it that does. I'm here to share my unique perspective on true crime, mental health, society, and popular culture, albeit with a slight sense of humor. I'm Collier Landry, and welcome to my show. Mover Nation, welcome back. It's funny that she quoted a Taylor Swift song. For those of you Kansas City Chiefs fans that are out there, it looks like they're going back to the Super Bowl, and Taylor is very excited. I haven't finished. The game isn't over yet, but it doesn't look good for the Ravens, who I thought were going to go to the Super Bowl and hopefully play the San Francisco 49ers, my team. But I want to welcome all of you because this case came to my attention. I mean, I've known about this for a long time, but somebody had asked my opinions, being someone who's been through a violent crime background, and if I wanted to weigh in on it. And I'm like, well, of course I do. I have an opinion on everything, right? Fix the microphone. I want to say a big shout out. Welcome to all my channel members, channel subscribers, and my Patreon supporters. We had our live meet and greet today, and all of you showed up, and it was amazing. Thank you so much for all your support. I also want to say, in starting out this dialogue, and I'm just proposing this. I want to engage with you guys, my audience, see what you guys think. You can let me know in the comments below. You can let me know in the chat here on the live. I want to say, I am just weighing in on this discussion. And as a violent crime survivor, we need and we must acknowledge the horrific nature of Ethan Crumbley's crime, the horror, and honor and respect the victims, the survivors, the families, and the community of Oxford and Oakland County, Michigan. I am not saying anything or trying to make their lives be in vain. I am just wanting to have this sort of debate with you guys because this case is unprecedented in United States history. And I got to kind of, because of the YouTube monitors, I got to kind of tiptoe around this mass casualty event. But we all know what this is, and it involved a school, and this minor, Ethan Crumbley, on November the 30th, 2021, took the lives of 4 of his fellow students and injured 6 others. And this rocked the community. The parents went on the run. It was a whole thing. And both parents have been incarcerated, have been jailed ever since. Well, not ever since, but ever since they went on the run. Sorry, just making sure everything is good. So anyways, I think this is a very important discussion because this is something that's unprecedented in U.S. history. We obviously have a big firearm problem here in the United States, and there are a lot of people that feel very passionate. This is a very divided and divisive topic for a lot of people who are involved and look. The Second Amendment is a big deal in the United States, and a lot of people feel very strongly about this. But at what point do we sort of find a logical argument between someone whose child had committed a heinous act and if they're responsible? And that's why this trial is such a big deal. And I don't even know if it's getting them as much attention we put on Alec Murdaugh coming back. And Alec Murdaugh and this retrial hearing that's going on tomorrow and all this other stuff. This is something that I think is really, really important for our nation moving forward, because we literally have there's so much at stake, because this will set precedent. Look, everything in law is set by precedent, and prosecutors, defense attorneys, judges will look back at the trials, because both of his parents are being tried separately. We'll look back on this and figure out, okay, how are we going to base case law moving forward? How are we going to base sentencing guidelines, verdicts, choosing to charge parents, because we have a real problem in this country. And I won't get into all of that, because again, YouTube monitors all that stuff. But this is a serious issue. So I want to go back and and again, I want you guys to engage here in the live chat, and tell me your opinions, because look, I'm not a lawyer. I am not a psychologist. I am not in law enforcement. I'm just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. And this is just my opinion that I'm giving. And again, I want to respect the victims and their families, but I also want to open up a dialogue, because there's a lot. There's a lot. And now James and Jennifer Crumbley are facing involuntary manslaughter charges, which in Michigan carry 15 years in prison minimum. It's a really big deal. And also, they have become, obviously, as to be expected, pariahs in their own community, and were, fugitives on the run, if you will, leading up to these events and after the mass casualty event at the high school. And it begs a lot of conversation, is what I'm trying to say. So I want to go over some of the stuff. When the second Karen Kozlowski, when the Second Amendment was written and enforced, it was an entirely different time in our world. Absolutely. I would argue that in the last 5 to 10 years, it's an entirely different time in our world. And it's about time our legislature and everybody catches up. And thank you so much, Black Widow. Please remember to like the live stream and grow the channel. Thank you so much. Okay. So here's the timeline of events, and the crux of this entire issue is that they are saying the parents were negligent. They were negligent, and they ignored the warning signs from Ethan Crumbley. And there is a lot of conjecture going on out there about their lifestyle choices, about alcohol abuse in the home. And even on the day that Ethan was called into school, the mother Jennifer Crumbley, who was on trial, wanting to not participate and had better things to do. So we're going to go over this timeline. So back in 2021, this began around November the 26th of 2021. And yes, Black Widow, are the parents slacking off on their parenting? Who knows? That is again the crux of this. Where did all this go? Come on, man. There we go. There's my timeline with my dates. All right. So on November 26, 2021, James Crumbley purchased the 9mm pistol with his son, Ethan, present. Later on that same day, Ethan posts about the newly acquired firearm on social media. November 27th, Jennifer Crumbley posts about spending time with her son, testing out his new Christmas present. They were at a shooting range. There's video of them there, her showing him how to properly handle the firearm. On November the 29th, Ethan's teacher notices him searching for ammunition online. And on November 30th, the fateful day, the school had attempted to contact Ethan's parents after the teacher's reports, quote, receiving no response. But here's apparently what did happen, is that the parents were called, and they were called by the school counselor so on the day of the shooting, go back, these notes are terrible. The note that they are saying is in question, that they noticed, and that Ethan Crumbley's teacher was alarmed by. She took a cell phone picture of it, as the prosecutor is alleging. And the note contained, quote, a drawing of a semi-automatic pistol pointing at the words and that says, "The thoughts won't stop me, help me." and it included a drawing of a bullet with, quote, blood everywhere written above it, McDonald said. Now, between the drawing of the gun and the bullet is a drawing of a person who appears to have been, I got the moderators, what can I say? YouTube monitors, shot twice and is bleeding. And below that figure is a drawing of a laughing emoji. He also said, "My life is useless and the world is dead." Now, his parents were called to school right away, and the counselor took Ethan Crumbley and his backpack into the office, and by then the drawing had been altered. The gun drawing, the bloody figure, and the words "help me," "my life is useless," "the world is dead," etc., had all been scratched out. The parents were shown the drawing. Now, this is Jennifer and James were shown the drawing, and they were told that they must get him counseling within the next 48 hours. The parents did not ask about the firearm and didn't inspect his backpack for it, which he still had with him. They resisted the idea of taking him out of school, and they left without him. He returned to the classroom. Just before 1 p.m. that day, school surveillance cameras had showed Ethan Crumbley with a backpack, and a minute later exiting the bathroom without it and the pistol in hand and the firearm in hand, according to the prosecutor. And he began firing. And then at 1:22 p.m., Ethan Crumbley's mother, Jennifer, who is now on trial, said, "Ethan, don't do it," to him. At 1:37, James Crumbley called 911, saying that the firearm was missing from their house, and he believed his son may have been the person who used that in that mass casualty event, and it had been stored in an unlocked drawer in their bedroom. So negligence is a massive part of this, but also is this beg education of the children? So I want to go into your comments and see what you guys think as well. By the way, Gen X Granny, did the Chiefs win? Because you were watching the football game. And yes, we sent you an email with all the lists yesterday of the Nightbot as well. You have all of the things. Lisa White says, "Totally agree. Parents need to be responsible. Kids don't ask to be born." But again, if a child, this is the thing. I grew up in a community where firearms were present. We would hunt. It was a big part of all that. And I remember, when I was finally adopted, being educated on how to use a firearm. And I can tell you about the first time I went to a range. I literally turned around with it in my hand, and my adopted father and my little brother and everybody freaked out. I was like, "Well, hold on. Am I holding it right?" But I turned around. They were like, "No." I learned very early, like, you don't do that. I didn't, I wasn't thinking, as I wasn't familiar with these types of things. But there is an education process. And I think at the crux of all of this is, again, what do they really teach their kid? And I also, in reading and doing research for this, I found it sort of alarming that the backpack was never searched, because I used to have a school locker, and I remember, submitting to searches in my school. And now that these mass casualty events are more are becoming, more and more tragically widespread in this country, why wasn't their first instinct to, like, "Oh, maybe we should check his backpack that we've seized"? So I think that's rather interesting that none of that was there. But again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not law enforcement. I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a guy who's been through a lot of shit. And this is my opinion. Now, I know a lot of people have watched this trial and probably know way more than me. Ethan Crumbley's original trial. Now, he is currently in prison, and he is I believe he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole when he was 17. The crime happened when he was 15. He was sentenced at 17, which brings up a whole other litany of issues when you think about how he was sentenced as a minor to essentially perish in prison. But that's another story for another day. And when you think about how our society approaches violent crime, etc., this is one of those things. I'm curious though, did any of you guys watch the trial? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much, Nesty, becoming a new member. The mom acted more like a peer more than a mother. Yeah, there's a lot of talk of that with, younger generations that are growing up, and certainly I'm not a parent. And again, I know that this is a very touchy subject for a lot of people, but I believe in facts over feelings. But the fact that a lot of younger parents are always trying to be like their child's best buddy and allowing them to sort of kind of run rampant. I've experienced a lot of this in my life when dealing with some of my peers, dealing with their children, kind of thinking, okay, well, this is a 20-year-old and he hasn't learned how to like fend for himself, made him get a job, et cetera, et cetera. So, it does beg the question. Lisa White says, I raised my sons on the shooting range and being taught to be responsible. Although that got me one son who was a Marine in Afghanistan and one is now a Fed, it probably caused my own stress. But yes, they learned these things at an early age, and they were taking him to a firing range to tell him how to use the firearm. So they did know better, at least. Karen Kozlowski says, I thought at one point all schools were supposed to have metal detectors and all doors locked during school hours. Am I wrong? No, I believe that I do believe that that was the case after the first mass casualty event back in the 1990s, that's what everyone was doing. Certainly we have those here in Los Angeles, and there is a protocol. So it is interesting that happened. Gen X Granny, I don't think are the members are the there we go. We have implemented Nightbot has implemented new commands for our mods. So now I'm noticing them here like, oh, okay, that's all working. This is great. Hello, Tina Luffman. Thank you so much. And Chiefs, yes, the Chiefs won 17-10. I can't believe it. I thought Baltimore was going to smoke them as they smoked my 49ers. Let's see. Could it be a Chiefs and Kansas City Super Bowl? Again, like another repeat, right? But sadly, in small rural schools can't afford them. Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point. So there is some case law on this in precedence. The U.S. Supreme Court has held that parents have a fundamental right to rear their children without undue interference by the government. This is Pierce versus Society of Sisters in 1925, 100 years ago. But in the same decision, the court upheld the power of the states to force parents to ensure that their children attend school. Because a lot of these arrests, and doing research for this, a lot of these arrests of children who are parents of kids committing crimes also deals a lot with childhood truancy in the school system. So parenting is by no means an unfettered right, and with many rights, it carries significant legal responsibilities. What are parent responsibility laws? Each state imposes legal responsibility on parents and legal guardians for the delinquent and criminal acts of minors in their charge. Parental responsibilities statutes have been in effect in the U.S. for at least 100 years, and many arose out of supplemental laws that prohibit contributing to the delinquency of a minor. So, as I said, such laws rest on the assumption that minors commit crimes because their parents have failed to exercise proper control and oversight, and that way to inspire parents to exert the necessary control is to punish them if they don't. Public demand for parental responsibility laws has fluctuated over time. The Columbine High School massacre and other similar incidents have inspired state and local lawmakers to enact parental responsibility laws. In the late 1980s, California and other states passed laws aimed at reducing what the states saw as an epidemic of gang-related crime by youths. Do these laws actually work, though, is the question. Studies conducted in Oregon, California, New York, and elsewhere suggest that parental responsibility laws are both infrequently enforced and of dubious effect when enforced. Laws are viewed by parents' rights groups and others as largely symbolic. Some convicted parents have challenged the constitutionality of these laws, but the courts have ruled in most cases that the state's compelling interest in child safety and public welfare justifies the laws. A common argument by parents is that they are being prosecuted for conduct that they did not condone or even know about, as in bringing narcotics to school, for example, or illegal substances. I'm going to get flagged by YouTube for this, I swear. These arguments are generally unsuccessful as long as the statute punishes parents for conduct by their children that a reasonably attentive parent should have known about and prevented. So let us go to, and again, her trial started on Thursday was jury selection on Friday, but let's get into a little bit of, there's a timeline of her text messages at the trial and saying things like, "We're on the run again." So on Friday, jurors heard explosive, and this comes from the Detroit Free Press. So this took place outside of Detroit, Michigan, home of the Detroit Lions, who are playing my San Francisco 49ers today. So jurors heard explosive testimony in Jennifer Crumbley's trial Friday that contradicts the Crumbley parents' long-held claim that they were not on the run following their son's arrest in the deadly 2021 Oxford High School mass casualty event. Specifically, jurors saw previously undisclosed messages from a cell phone Jennifer Crumbley purchased after the shooting. Police took Jennifer and James Crumbley's phones following the arrest of their son, who carried out the deadly shooting and has since pleaded guilty and been sentenced to life in prison. According to trial testimony, Jennifer Crumbley deleted messages that she had written to her boss in the middle of the night on December 2nd, 2021, the day before Oakland County prosecutor Karen McDonald announced involuntary manslaughter charges against the couple. So within 3 days. A manhunt was launched for the couple after charges were announced, with authorities alleging the couple were fugitives. Along with deleted messages on Jennifer Crumbley's just purchased phone, according to witness testimony, this one is to her boss. Quote, "We're on the run again. Helicopters, not sure where to. I'll message you." It was sent at 1:31 a.m. So this is what they are trying to say in the trial, which again, day 2 was on Friday. This is when they started hearing this testimony. And on day 1, the prosecution showed the high stakes and tension of the case, with lawyers shouting at times and the defendant breaking down in tears when she saw for the first time video of her son's rampage at Oxford High School on November 30th, 2021. Now, I believe they didn't see any of this because they had been arrested on December 2nd, 2021. So they've been held in jail the whole time. Ethan Crumbley had pled guilty to murdering 4 students and injuring 7 other people, and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. That was on December 10th, 2023, when he was finally sentenced. His parents, who obviously have been jailed since 3 days after the shooting, with her husband's trial, James Crumbley, is set for March the 5th on the same charges as his wife. And there will, of course, be live stream from the case. So she said, quote, something to the effect of, "I'm going to get drunk and ride my horse." The prosecution showed jurors the potentially most damning evidence against Jennifer Crumbley and her husband: text messages from their son in distress and them not responding, sometimes because they were busy riding their horses. This is a central theme in the prosecution's case, that the Crumbleys ignored a son who they knew was in distress and spiraling downward, never got him help, and paid more attention to their personal lives instead, particularly their horses. And jurors heard a lot about that on Friday. They saw photos of the Crumbleys posing and smiling with their horses, taken at the same time. Their son was texting them, and as that he was hallucinating and seeing demons throw bowls in the house. For example, here is what he texted his parents on March 17th, 2021, St. Patrick's Day, 9 months before the event. "Okay, the house is now haunted," he texted at 6:03 p.m. Some weird shit just happens and now I'm scared. I got some videos and a picture of the demon. It is just throwing bowls. I'm not joking. It is effing up the kitchen. I'm just going to go outside for a while. Can you, and at 6:29 p.m., half hour later almost, can you at least text back? The mother did not respond until 2 days later. Cell phone images that had been taken from Jennifer Crumbley's phone showed that at the exact time her son started texting her, she and her husband were at the horse barn smiling with their horses. Jurors saw these photos along with a text message from the same day that the defense tried to keep it out of trial, but Oakland County Circuit Court Judge Cheryl Matthews let it in. It was Jennifer Crumbley telling her husband, "I'm going to get drunk, want to ride my horse." Defense attorney Shannon Smith objected that the messages being shown, the messages being shown, noting that the judge had previously ruled that the Crumbley's alcohol use would not be admitted as evidence at trial, and it was irrelevant and potentially inflammatory. But over Smith's objections, Matthews allowed this message in because, as she concluded, it was relevant to what was going on. The boy was in distress, and the parents weren't responding. Under questioning by the defense, Wagrovsky testified that he doesn't know whether Jennifer Crumbley ever saw the text messages her son sent to a friend concerning his need for help. In earlier testimony, Wagrovsky had said that he had learned Ethan Crumbley had only had one friend, and who had been abruptly taken out of Michigan about a month before the shooting. Wagrovsky testified to finding more than 20,000 messages between the two. So again, as some of you have mentioned, is this just really bad parenting in a lot of ways? These are two parents who have just not been around and not been involved in their sons' lives. And, I grew up in a time when video games were present. And I remember, I had several friends who the choice of babysitting was to let the kid just like play video games, watch television, he'll figure it out himself. Here's a movie. And the parents go on and do what they want to do. Right. And I think that that's probably become a lot more prevalent when you think about it in our modern day society, because I remember somebody had mentioned to me, Gen Z is officially the iPad generation, right? And Gen Z being the iPad generation, I know many parents, and again, I'm not a parent myself. I'm a fur dad. I am a Chihuahua dad, if you will. But a lot of these parents just give the kid the iPad and say, "Hey, have at it." Okay, it's like the modern day pacifier. And obviously, if they were not parenting their son or being there for him and he's in mental distress, are they indeed liable for all this? And it appears that obviously the prosecution thinks so, and the state does. Karen Kozlowski, question. I thought at one point also, sorry, we already read that. My bad. Wow, I'm doing great today. The whole Super Planner Girl says the whole ignoring your kids' problems and not getting them help. This is so very sad. Absolutely. A lot of parents just sort of let kids run amok. There's rampant. I mean, I have friends whose, kids were doing, all kinds of crazy stuff in high school. And I thought, do parents really let that happen? They have having house parties, having crazy, I don't know. And let me be clear too. I'm no person to sit here and pontificate about children's behavior because I don't have any children. So for me, I just think all of this is very interesting. And again, I think the seriousness of all of this and the legal implications moving forward, it's a question of, can other parents be held liable? I mean, obviously we know, hey, Jen DeSemio, thank you so much. Member for 8 months. Can parents be held liable for their children's actions? And again, let's say, I mean, I remember reading about parents who would supply alcohol to children. And I had many friends that would have house parties and they would have alcohol. And when we were in high school, and are you liable if one of those people gets in a car? Well, yeah, you're civilly liable for sure. And you could be criminally liable if somebody leaves that party and is intoxicated and then goes in and gets into a car accident and loses their life, right? Student, that happens all the time. However, how were they specifically supposed to know that their child had the firearm there until they found it afterwards? It seems like in a lot of ways, maybe they were just, well, what can I say? Stupid and didn't care. I think really that's the crux of all of this, is that you had really negligent parents that probably shouldn't have been parents in the first place, and a son who was deeply troubled, and they are trying to just live their best life, put themselves on social media, go ride our horses. I mean, if you have horses, you have to have some level of affluence as well. And I guess this goes back to the whole nature versus nurture thing. Is it nature and our inherent traits that make us do these types of things? Or is it because we were brought up in an environment that allows us to, I don't know, feel entitled, or allows us to not feel that the rules apply to us, or allows us to be angry, or we don't get attention, so we're going to take it out on other people? Lisa White says, my sons were rarely allowed to spend the night at others' houses. Their friends that I approved of were always welcome to be at our house. That's great. I mean, I think that this is something that is, obviously you want to be the best parent you can be, but I do wonder oftentimes if our dependence upon social media and this wanting to be the cool parent, if this, if this is encouraging this behavior more and more, and when children don't get what they want, they act out in more and more extreme ways. Lawyer you don't know says, I'm not sympathetic to these parents at all, but I wonder if this is a slippery slope. Absolutely. And that's what I'm curious about. Hey, lawyer you don't know. Do you know lawyer because he's in LA. Maybe you'll jump on. But I think that's the thing, is that legal precedents are set and then case law is determined from all of this. Again, I'm not a lawyer, but this is just how the system works. If they are found guilty of this because they were negligent parents, I think this is going to open up the floodgates for everything. And I'm not saying that is necessarily a bad thing. And I also think that a lot of parents now are going to take things a lot more seriously. Marisol's taking things very seriously as she barks over there. They're going to take them a lot more seriously because of the potential impact on their own lives. And I'm sure, and to be honest, when you look at a family member that commits a crime like this, of course they're not happy. They're miserable, and they've been incarcerated living with this. And their son is now incarcerated for the rest of his natural life. 17 years old. He was arrested at age 15. Just think about that. And I was talking to someone today, and I was thinking about my father, who has been incarcerated now 34 years since he was arrested. 34 years since he was arrested. And what that looks like. I'm 45. Ethan Crumbley was 15 when he was arrested. So 30 years to be my age. I can't imagine for the last 30 years being in prison. And then looking at the next 30 years, at least, of being in prison. I mean, think about like let that sit in for a moment and think about how the parents and look, as I said, respect to the victims, respect to the victims' families, the survivors of the shooting, the community, the surrounding community, even the nation. When you think about this, the impacts that these things have, but we do have to have a little bit, because I am sure the Crumbleys have been just excoriated beyond belief on social media and in the public eye. Obviously, they are on trial and they are facing these very serious charges. I mean, their lives are essentially over in so many ways, because everything they thought was normal, is now not. And that's the consequences of violence, which I'm obviously very passionate about. I made a film, Murder in Mansfield, because these things are very important to me. When you look at this, are we in a lot of ways setting a potentially dangerous precedent, because this is going to open up the floodgates? Or is this a canary in the coal mine to tell parents, hey, wake up and pay attention to what your kids are doing? I don't know. I do think it is. Wishful makeuping says Ethan has shown more maturity and responsibility than his parents have shown to the law, and more importantly to him. That's interesting, because I believe that he pled guilty, by the way. Ethan pled guilty to the crime. And I believe he's even planning on that taking the fifth, potentially, against testifying against his mother. I mean, that's going to be horrible. As someone who had to testify against his father, and granted, I wanted to testify against my father, but also being put in this position, you're incarcerated, and then you have forced to testify against your own mother for a crime that you committed. Let's take a look at that. What does that look like for him? I mean, I'm telling you, as someone who testified against his own father, I don't regret my decision to do that at all, but I have faced a lot of backlash in my life about making that choice from people who, who have a very anachronistic, hey, word of the day, anachronistic. We'll get into that later. An anachronistic way of thinking, which is very old fashioned, and think that you shouldn't rat on your parents. You shouldn't do this. You shouldn't do that. And there's some loyalty that goes along with this, my own father included. I personally disagree with that. But again, being forced or put in a way where you're going to have to go against your parents. I mean, it's like being in a torture chamber. Which apparently, while Ethan Crumbley was temporarily incarcerated or jailed, he did did Google research online, torture chamber, and torture tactics. This is a very troubled young man, unfortunately, who I feel like didn't get a fair shake in life, because if his parents were neglectful of him, he had no life, and then he has no shot at life. And that's what really makes me sad. She's barking away down there by us, by the way. Getting into your comments, the parents were obviously folk who were happy to leave their distressed son to, quote, get over it while they were preoccupied elsewhere. Yes, absolutely. I'm trying to go back here. I am not, Karen Van says, I am not my kid's friend. A little more now that they are grown, but I am still mama, and I still take that seriously. Yes. Dominique says, I just think kids are growing up in a whole different world than we did with social media, etc. They have so many more social pressures, and they can't escape even at home. Now, I would concur with that, because again, social media, look, bullying is not new, right? Bullying has been going on forever. I was stuffed in lockers. I was thrown up against lockers because of my father and because of who I was. And, kids get picked on. It's unfortunately part of growing up. But now with this whole new generation of people who use social media, we have Snapchat. Snapchat's very popular with the kids, as they say, and using to share messages and excluding kids out of groups, because children can feel excluded because they're in school. So they can be, the biggest deal was sitting at the cool kids table in the lunchroom, right? You go into the lunchroom, you want to sit down, you want to feel part of a group, you want to feel part of a community, and you're not allowed to sit with them, whether it's the football team or whether it's the cheerleading squad or whether it's the nerds or whether it's the jocks or whatever. You want to be the choir kids, the band kids, you want to be a part of a group, and to be ostracized from that group physically is one thing, but then also to be ostracized from that group online or in social media or socially is a whole other, I don't know, for lack of a better word, mindfuck. I mean, it's something that children really have to deal with. And I think as parents, it's something that needs to be addressed. But again, I'm not here to pontificate on children because I don't have any. Elizabeth Whitney says, yes, the trial has been fascinating. Lucy says, this situation is criminal and they didn't care about the welfare of their child. And unfortunately, those whose lives were taken, the children, it was the result. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to reword your comment for YouTube guidelines. Super Planet Girl says, so many parents need to go to trial, then so many negligent parents whose kids don't commit these crimes but are impacted in so many other ways. Yeah, absolutely. I would concur with that because you think about it, and just because they don't go out and they don't commit crimes. I talk about this all the time. Having trauma impact you and having a really crappy childhood and really bad things happen to you does not give you an excuse to not get on with your life, but does not give you an excuse to be a good person or a bad person, or to say, hey, well, I don't feel good about this and that, and I'm just going to go take it out in the world. And I think a lot of children do get angry about that. And that's why we are seeing more of these mass casualty events in the United States at schools, because they're not able to deal with it. They're not able to talk to someone. Why isn't the school counselor searching the backpack? Why don't they have the authority to do that? Or did they have the authority to do that? And were they negligent? Now, I did not watch Ethan Crumbley's trial, so I have no idea or any of these events. But what I'm saying is if there was, why didn't the school look into the bag if indeed the firearm was in there? And then do you hold the people in the school responsible for that? Are they negligent as well for not seeing warning signs? And they attempted to involve the parents, but where do we draw the line? Where is the responsibility in effect bifurcated, if you will? Because we'll say, okay, how on one hand, we're going to put all the blame on the parents coming, and the parents didn't want to take him out of school. On the other hand, where are the administrators of the school saying we need to isolate this kid, check him out, get him into some sort of situation because the parents aren't going to deal with it, and if we legitimately feel threatened, we should take this threat seriously. And then why are they not held accountable? This is the slippery slope that I think a lot of this is going down, unfortunately. But I mean, we'll see. We'll see. Let me see here. I'm going to get back to some of your comments. Marie Z says schools do have the authority to search, but they have immunity. Okay, so they do have the authority to search. So why wasn't there a search performed? Which is what I think. I had my locker tossed when I was in high school. They were looking for stuff. Of course, they didn't find anything. They didn't have anything. But we had to submit to locker searches. That's nothing new. Tina Luppin says most experts say never to let your teenager to have their phones when it's time for bed so they can sleep and not be stressed. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure, but easier said than done. People will sneak laptops out and sneak phones, and kids are crazy. Kids are shifty. Kids are smart. To be honest with you, they can figure out ways. Nora Vine says parents and teachers are not what they used to be. Yeah, do you guys think that this is this case in particular, is this a bigger call for us to look at, like, how we parent our children, how we look at our schools and our teachers, how we support those school systems and teachers? Interesting thing to think about. Super Planet Girl, it's crazy tough landscape for parents right now. I'm in the thick of it. I'm so sorry, but yeah, I'm sure. Let us get into something here. Social media. Let me look something up here really fast. Impact. I want to see if there is. So this comes from the Child Mind Institute, which, just a quick Google search here. So transforming children's lives. Millions of children, as many as 1 in 5, struggle with mental health or learning challenges. Fully 70% of U.S. counties do not have a single child and adolescent psychiatrist, due to stigma, misinformation, and a lack of access to care. The average time between onset symptoms and any treatment at all is over 8 years, and our children deserve better. That's why the Child Mind Institute was created. We're dedicated to transforming the lives of children and families struggling with mental health and learning disorders by giving them the help they need. We become the leading independent nonprofit in children's mental health by providing gold standard evidence-based care, delivering educational resources to millions of families each year, training educators in underserved communities, and developing tomorrow's breakthrough treatments. So that's who they are. I'm going to read this article that's on their website, which literally pops up and says, so many parents worry about exposure to technology. Many parents worry about how exposure to technology might affect toddlers developmentally. We know our preschoolers are picking up new social and cognitive skills at a stunning pace, and we don't want hours spent glued to an iPad to impede that. But adolescence is an equally important period of rapid development, and too few of us are paying attention to how our teenagers use technology. Much more intense and intimate than a 3-year-old playing with dad's iPhone is affecting them. In fact, experts worry that the social media and text messages that have become so integral to teenage life are promoting anxiety and lowering self-esteem. Now, one of the things I did find interesting is the fact that Ethan was text messaging with his mother, Jennifer, and then her not getting back to him, and that he felt like that was his only line of communication instead of maybe even picking up the phone. And again, it appears as though these parents had been negligent of their son and not paying attention to the warning signs and not being proactive and ignoring him. And again, we've put them on trial for being negligent and it caused loss of life in a mass casualty scenario, a mass casualty event at the school. right? But at what point do we sort of figure out how we can, what that fine line is between them being negligent and being responsible, right? Or being responsible for the creation of the events and the actions of the kid. I mean, there are so many people that I talk to on an almost daily basis, and they always ask me like, how did I get through my trauma? What did I do? How did I become who I am? Right. And this isn't a pat on the back or anything. This is just matter of fact. People ask me this. And because many people will blame their upbringing for what happened. Oh, I wasn't treated this way as a child. Oh, I wasn't, nobody looked after me. I didn't feel heard. I didn't feel supported. I was traumatized by that. There are very traumatic events, and I've experienced one. It's a very significant one as a young adolescent boy. But at some point when you grow up, you have to say these things won't affect me either. I'm not going to let the neglect that I experienced or the events that cause certain actions in my life or put me in certain situations to affect me, because now I'm an adult. And a lot of people, I feel like, and this might be just this new age of parenting, these new parents have experienced these letdowns as a child. I didn't get this, life wasn't fair. And then that trickles down to their children, which is, why are you having children? I certainly don't have children. Why are you having children? Back to this article. Young people report that there might be a good reason to worry. A survey conducted by the Royal Society for Public Health asked 14 to 24-year-olds in the UK how social media platforms impacted their health and well-being. The survey results found that Snapchat, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram all lead to increased feelings of depression, anxiety, poor body image, and loneliness. Indirect communication. Teens are masters at keeping themselves occupied in the hours after school until way past bedtime. When they're not doing their homework, and when they are, they're online and they're on phones, texting, sharing, trolling, and scrolling, you name it. Of course, before everyone had an Instagram account, teens kept themselves busy too, but they were more likely to do their chatting on the phone or in person when hanging out at the mall, which I don't even believe malls exist anymore. It may have looked a lot like a lot of aimless teens hanging around, but what they were doing was experimenting, trying out skills, succeeding and failing in tons of tiny real-time interactions that kids today are missing out on. For one thing, modern teens are learning to do most of their communication while looking at a screen and not another person. So you're not reading their faces. You're not seeing these interactions and these reactions to what people are doing. And I know we have all experienced this. You send a text message to someone and you're like, oh, I don't know if I meant that way, because it just doesn't come off the same way. And we absorb this in a way and we say, oh, that person doesn't like me or that person's mad at me. And then we have to sort of figure it out. I was just talking to my mother, Susan, about this yesterday. She said, oh, I felt bad when I sent a text message to somebody and I had to call them to say, no, I didn't mean it that way, or please don't take it that way. And we're not aware of this. And so this article quotes, as a species, we are very highly attuned to reading social cues, says Catherine Steiner Adair, EDD, a clinical psychologist and author of The Big Disconnect. Quote, there's no question kids are missing out on very critical social skills. In a way, texting and online communicating is not like it's not like it creates a nonverbal learning disability, but it puts everyone in a nonverbal disabled context where body language, facial expression, and even the smallest kinds of vocal reactions are rendered invisible, which is a good point. Getting back to the chat, it looks like somebody gave a super sticker. Thank you so much. Cat loves cat skills. And thank you so much, Wishful Makeuping, for the sticker, the super sticker. And you guys are going back and forth. I think you'd have to limit online time, says Gen X Granny, and they would still try to fight and sneak time. Yeah, I believe that too. Dominique Nesti, I didn't get many choices as a child. I think I overcompensated with my children, and they don't appreciate it. Of course, and I'm not saying that spoiling your children is bad or wanting to give them things that you don't have. I mean, look, my parents didn't have what I had as a child. If I ever have children, they won't have what I had as a child. You always want to give your children a better life, right? So I'm not here to excoriate or chastise or anyone that does that. I grew up sometimes with kids who had a lot of privilege, and their first car was like a BMW. It's like, how does that work, right? And do you know how do you have a job? Do you have this? And I live in California now. I grew up in a small town in Ohio, but in California, I see these high schools and there's Ferraris in the parking lots, and there's very Bugattis, like craziness, and that those are not the teachers' cars. You know that for a fact. So to see some of these lifestyles and then you see them online, it becomes a massive issue and affects their psyche, I'm sure. And then it kind of creates this sort of delusional sense of reality that the things that they see on social media, because we all know that social media, people's persona on social media is a whole other thing. It isn't really what their lives are like. Oh, you're living my best life. I mean, they could be miserable. I know so many people who have look like they have fabulous lives on social media. You realize that they're really struggling inside. They're really hurting. It's just like money doesn't compensate those things. It's the exact same reason. Mom of 10 says it created a mentality of entitlement. Karen Fan says, I drove a 68 Nova and I graduated in 1984. Bet you wish you had that 68 Nova now, though, because those are super cool to have now. Yeah, it's entitlement. Okay, so what does it say about lowering the risk? Certainly speaking indirectly creates a barrier to clear communication, but that's not all. Learning how to make friends is a major part of growing up. And that's what they were asserting, that Ethan Crumbley's one friend was taken away from Michigan at a time that was most critical in his life. And they had traded over, as they said, the prosecutor said, over 20,000 text messages. 20,000 text messages. I don't even know if I've ever sent 20,000 text messages in my life. Maybe I have. I've been doing texting for a very long time. But when you think about that, as an interaction as a 15-year-old child, that's a lot of interaction and development with people, with someone who who you've grown to believe is a confidant or somebody who's going to be there for you. And then to have that person removed, out of your life almost instantaneously, and then you're left, and then you have negligent parents, you can see why this happened. It does not justify it. It does not justify it at all. But the situation that was created was not healthy. And the fact that his parents didn't understand that. And that's what I think is interesting with this trial is I feel like this is the bad parenting trial too, because you're saying you were not there for your kid. Also, you were negligent to not take action on that day, to not try to take action, to not yank him out of school, to not do that. And it feels like a lot of ways, and I'm sure this is going to be the crux of the prosecution's case again, is they were negligent. They didn't care about the kid. They didn't really want to have the kid. They're like, he can stay at school because I want to go get drunk and hang out with my horses and ride my horses. And that's the thing. I mean, that's horrible. But again, this is a young man who didn't get a shot at life. And that, I think, is probably the thing that makes me the most sad, is that Ethan Crumbley didn't get a shot at life. His parents were negligent, and everybody loses. And 11 families in total have either lost or been injured because of this. And a community as a whole has been traumatized because of the violence that occurred out of this neglect and this sort of, in a way, it feels, well, it's neglect is what it is. And that's a form of other things that really affect children being neglected. Learning how to make friends is a major part of growing up, and friendship requires a certain amount of risk taking. This is true for making a new friend, but is also true for maintaining friendships. When there are problems that need to be faced, big ones or small ones, it takes courage to be honest about your feelings and then hear what the other person has to say. Learning to effectively cross these bridges is part of what makes friendships fun and exciting, and also scary. Quote, part of healthy self-esteem is knowing how to say what you think and feel even when you're in disagreement with other people or it feels emotionally risky, notes Dr. Steiner Adair. But when friendship is conducted online and through text, kids are doing this in a context stripped of many of the most personal and sometimes intimidating aspects of communication. It's easier to keep your guard up when you're texting, so less is at stake. You aren't hearing or seeing the effect that your words are having on the other person. Because the conversation isn't happening in real time, each party can take more time to consider a response. And no wonder kids saying calling someone on the phone is, quote, too intense. It requires more direct communication. And if you aren't used to that, it may feel scary. If kids aren't getting enough practice relating to people and getting their needs met in person and in real time, many of them will grow up to be adults who are anxious about our species' primary means of communication: talking. And of course, social negotiations only get riskier as people get older and begin navigating romantic relationships and employment. Cyberbullying and imposter syndrome is obviously a huge problem with this. So this is the Child Mind Institute. This is an article dealing with how using social media affects teenagers, because we got into this conversation. I figured let's roll with it. The other big danger that comes from kids communicating more indirectly is that it has gotten easier to be cruel. Quote, kids tell all sorts of things that you would never in a million years contemplate saying to anyone's face, says Donna Wick, EDD, a clinical and developmental psychologist. She notes that this seems to be especially true of girls who typically don't like to disagree with each other in real life. The mean girls, this, that, and the, we all know this. You hope to teach them that they can disagree without jeopardizing the relationship. But what social media is teaching them to do is to disagree in ways that are more extreme and do jeopardize the relationship. It's exactly what you don't want to have happen, she says. Dr. Steiner Adair agrees that girls are particularly at risk. Girls are socialized more to compare themselves to other people, girls in particular, to develop their identities. So it makes them more vulnerable to the downside of all of this. She warns that a lack of solid self-esteem is often to blame. Quote, we forget the relational aggression that comes from insecurity and feeling awful about yourself and wanting to put other people down so you feel better. Peer acceptance is a big thing for adolescents, and many of them care about their image as much as a politician running for office. And to them, it can feel as serious, unless you are an adolescent politician running for office. Add to that the fact that kids today are getting actual polling data on how much people like them or their appearance via things like likes. It's enough to turn anyone's head. Who wouldn't want to make herself look cooler if she can? So kids can spend hours pruning their online identities, trying to protect an idealized image. Teenage girls sort through hundreds of photos, agonizing over which ones to post online. Boys compete for attention by trying to outgross one another, pushing the envelope as much as they can in the already disinhibited atmosphere online, and kids gang up on each other. This reminds me of something that I saw. There was a milk crate challenge, which was a widely like TikTok viral challenge where people stacked milk crates. You guys know what those are? Those plastic milk crates. I use them all the time for camera equipment and lighting gear and everything. We use them. It's a thing we have on set all the time. And they were stacking these milk crates to walk over them. It was like a little pyramid. So you walk up and you walk down. That's the challenge, but you can break through this. But they would stack them 3 or 4. These things are about 20 inches high. So 5 or 6 stacked on top of one another. It's 100 inches sometimes. That's well over, 8 feet tall when you think about it. And they would stack them up. And then, of course, like, the injuries ensue. People fall. And some of these people are doing it on concrete, not on grass, not on a gym mat, on concrete, and falling and obviously, clearly hurting themselves. And you see this, and this is, again, one of these dangers, right? Is you experience this and they're trying to outcompete people. Look at all these social media challenges that occur. Marisol. Sorry, guys. And kids end up ganging up on each other. Adolescents have always been doing this, but with the advent of social media, they are faced with more opportunities and more traps than ever before. When kids scroll through their feeds and see how great everyone seems, it only adds to the pressure. We're used to worrying about the impractical ideals that Photoshop magazine models give to our kids. But what happens when the kid next door is Photoshopped too? Even more confusing about what about when your own profile doesn't really represent the person that you feel you are on the inside. Quote, adolescence and the early 20s in particular are the years in which you are actually aware of the contrast between who you appear to be and who you think you are, says Dr. Wick. It's similar to the imposter syndrome in psychology. As you get older and acquire more mastery, you begin to realize that you actually are good at some things, and then you feel that gap hopefully narrow. But imagining having your deepest, darkest fear be that you aren't as good as you look, and then image needing to look that good at the same time. It becomes exhausting, unquote. As Dr. Steiner Adair explains, self-esteem comes from consolidating who you are. The more identities you have, and the more time you spend pretending to be someone you aren't, the harder it's going to be to feel good about yourself. This totally changed. This totally switched over from what I was originally talking about. But we are discussing the implications of Jennifer Crumbley going on trial and James Crumbley going on trial on March the 5th, and what their impact was in the crime that occurred at the Oakland Park High School in Oakland, outside Detroit, Michigan. And the events that occurred on November the 30th, 2021, and how that impact and her neglect, and how his father's neglect may have led to the crime and the casualties that ensued from there. So I'm going to go back to some of your comments here as well. Barb H1 says, sorry I'm late. I thought it started at 4. My 2 cents on social media. It's insane to allow kids to have phones while in class. It's insane. I would agree. Lucy says, I think the social media is used far too much by the average person on social media. It can take away from life experiences that may be missed. I agree with that. I concur with that. I give myself a lot to you guys here on this channel, and this is something that I'm choosing to do as a career, and to move myself forward. This podcast, this YouTube channel, and all the things that I do. But yeah, a lot of times we have to look at the world around us and appreciate life for what it is. It's not always about comparing and contrasting yourself to other people. And unfortunately, in the case of, again, this is the thing that is most heartbreaking to me as a child victim, as someone who had to testify against a parent for taking the life of another, as someone who dealt with a lot of these things growing up. I feel like this kid wasn't given. Ethan Crumbley, in my opinion, I would love to hear what your opinions are in the comments below. I feel, in my opinion, Ethan Crumbley wasn't given a chance at life, and now he has to spend the rest of his life in prison. And really, that's what Jennifer Crumbley is on trial for. And that's really what her husband, James Crumbley, is going to be put on trial for, is the fact that they neglected this kid. And because of their solipsistic nature, their wanton selfishness, a young man lost his life, but also 4 other young people lost their lives, and a community was traumatized and impacted, and 7 survivors have to deal with the aftermath of this mass casualty event and the violence that was caused in the wake of all of this. Maybe it's a time we kind of wake up what we're teaching our kids and all that. Again, I'm not here to pontificate on parents, but this is just my opinion. You guys come here for my opinion on all of this. That's what it is. Anyways, I want to say thank you so much to all my channel members, all my channel subscribers. Thank you so much to new member Ness T and returning member for 8 months, Jen DeSimio. Thank you guys so much. We actually had our live meet and greet today. Channel members and Patreon members only live meet and greets. I'm doing once a month. If I get more members, we're doing them twice a month. It'll be great. But I want to say thank you all so much for listening to what I have to say, sitting down here, coming and joining the community, engaging with one another. I really appreciate it. It makes me feel like I'm making some sort of impact in the world and your lives. And I love the conversations that we're having. Please, if you wouldn't mind, on the way out, please click the like, please click the subscribe button. If you like this content, I know this was a far stretch from talking about Alec Murdaugh and trials and things of that nature, but I do think that some of these conversations are really, really important moving forward in our society, because the world, our world is becoming more and more fractured. and we're becoming more and more alienated. And the only way to do this is if we can keep having conversations and keep engaging with each other. At least we're engaging and having those conversations in the first place. I am done. I am off my soapbox. I love all of you so much. Thank you so much for being here. Please, if you wouldn't mind too, just drop a comment if you are enjoying this content. And if you like seeing me live here, I'm thinking about expanding the program to more days. Do you like the timing? You guys like this 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern time? Does that work for everyone? I am live, by the way, on YouTube, 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesdays and Sundays. But if you want to see more of me, if you want me more live, talking about more of these cases, talking about more of these social aspects of society and popular, like I said, true crime, mental health, popular culture. I have really strong opinions about all this. And I'd love to do it more. Please, if you wouldn't mind, engage in the comments. Let me know what you guys are thinking. And hey, guys, Mover Nation, we get through another one. Again, thank you to all my YouTube channel members and Patreon supporters. Without you guys, it wouldn't be possible. And thank you, the audience, for being here, because this is, I do it for you guys, and I do it so we can engage in this community and ask questions and hopefully change one another's lives and change the world just one little bit at a time. On that note, I'm Collier Landry. I'll see you on the next one. This podcast is made possible by support from listeners just like you. For exclusive content around this podcast, please consider supporting me via Patreon by going to collierlandry.com/support. Please subscribe via Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts from, and please leave us a 5-star review. If you want to see video episodes of this podcast, please check out my YouTube channel at youtube.com/collierlandry. You can find links to additional resources in the show notes of today's episode. This podcast is a production of Don't Touch My Radio. Copyright Collier Landry.